Hey, good evening, everyone. Thanks for coming to our Locknote session. We started the day with our keynote. We're going to end it with a Locknote. And I really appreciate you being here because I understand there's beer somewhere being had. And so we've got a little bit of pressure to perform for you here so you feel that this was a worthwhile trade-off. Okay, so if you've never been to one of these before, what we're going to do is I'm going to call up some of the review board members that helped select the talks that you saw today. And we're going to talk about what happened at Black Hat, but we're also going to discuss some other trends in the industry. And what we're trying to create, what I'm trying to create here, is you're observing friends having a conversation about topics that are interesting. So you're sort of overhearing the experts talk about something. And then, once we get into it for a while, we go to the audience for some questions. So this isn't really scripted. Basically, if you look, I just have a couple of topics. And every time we're in the room getting ready and we start to talk around a topic, it's like, stop, save that, right? We can't talk everything through ahead of time. This all has to be kind of spontaneous. So that's the plan. So we're going to start it off. I'm going to stand over here near the beer and the water. And we're going to call up our 4 review board members. Okay, so first up is Daniel Cuthbert. Come on up, Dan. He's got Dan's had a career over 20 years of both offense and defense. And he was the original co-author of the OWASP testing guide, released in 2003. And now he's the co-author of the OWASP application security verification standard. And he's also a member on the UK Government Cyber Advisory Board, GCAB. Okay, next up, Saša is Chief CTO. CTO at Reversing Labs and operating partner at Crosspoint Capital with over 20 years of Fortune 10 global executive leadership experience. And then next to him will be Meadow. Meadow conducts hardware security research and engineering in the fintech world and also specializes in out-of-bounds data exfiltration, physical security, and surveillance technologies. And finally, Marina. She is a cybersecurity professional with over a decade of hands-on experience in securing ICS, industrial control systems, and industrial Internet of Things devices. Okay, so we've got a pretty good mix. We've got some hardware, software, AppSec, offense, defense. I'm going to start off with the most important question. Who wants a beer? Okay. And who wants water?
Water, please, sir.
Okay.
More importantly, I want a beer opener.
You need the beer opener.
Bottle opener.
No, that's part of the problem solving.
There you go.
We get adapt and overcome. Okay, and I think I might have a beer as well, because it would be cheating not to.
Okay.
I'm not going to use my teeth. That would not be cool.
Have a sparkling water.
They teased me and said there was an opener in here. What's up? Oh, here it is. Okay, got it. Okay, sorry for that little delay. There you go. So we've got some subjects we're going to kick it off with. And then from there, we're going to see where the conversation takes us. So first up, I want to talk a little bit about being on the review board. What didn't you see? Like normally you spend a lot of time looking at submissions, so you can see trends, what's coming in, what's not coming in. So maybe we talk a little bit, what didn't you see? And what I'm thinking of is, did you see a lot of Web3, blockchain, NFT buzzwords?
No, thank God.
Or did we gotten through that and survived?
I think we've passed. We also didn't see a lot of AI, which is surprising. We genuinely thought we would see an influx like last year. There was a lot of Web3. And don't get me wrong, I enjoy the technical capabilities of Web3, but a lot of it was also a Ponzi scheme. We thought we'd see a lot of AI. The one benefit I saw this year was we finally had submitters using AI to help with their submissions.
Oh, no. So did you see a lot of like ChatGPT submissions?
But not in a bad way, in a positive way. It was easy. Because a lot of the times, when you get many submissions, a lot of people struggle to articulate what they're trying to say. So we want to reach out and help them. You'll have Zoom, Teams, Meet calls, whatever. But I found AI helping people get their message across better.
So it's sort of like a prompt hack, like in the voice of Black Hat Review Board.
Yeah, pretty much. Yeah, you are Jeff Moss.
Yeah, that's right. I don't know if that frightens me or encourages me, right? I know the Grammarly seems to be a pretty good use, right, to make things a little bit more legible. Anybody else notice any differences? Things you're happy you didn't see?
I just wanted to say, so like people started, the submitters started to use a lot of ChatGPT to write submissions. What they don't know that ChatGPT plagiarizes itself a lot. So that is how we can figure out that it's ChatGPT.
It's too general?
It plagiarizes itself.
Oh, plagiarizes itself,
yes.
yeah.
It's basically using the same, sentences or words or facts for multiple talks.
Yeah.
So it's just learned so much that ChatGPT.
Yeah, I was surprised on the one AI talk, but you know, I was thinking like maybe we're through the initial sort of FUD and we're into the part of like, okay, first of all, I hate the term AI. I like statistical inference or the things it's actually doing because AI is not a precise enough term. So it's hard to have a conversation about it when you're not even using the correct terminology. But maybe we're at the point now where we can use these statistical inference to or predictive models to actually do useful things, log analysis or other such things, anomaly detection, where before it was sort of like everybody was casting about for what it's good for, and maybe now they're starting to figure out what it's useful for, so maybe we're seeing less noise.
Well, I had conversations even today with some of the vendors on the floor, and you know, you explore the solution and say, oh yeah, we heavily leverage AI, and then explain how. And when they explain it, you know, my comment back was, well, it sounds like you guys are leveraging, you know, either really awesome advanced heuristics or it's supervised machine learning. They're like, well, yeah, no, that's what I'm like, and that's fine. Just say that.
Just say that.
Just say that. It's awesome. Like that's not less than.
Remember when there was expert systems?
Right.
I remember I was watching a thread on Mastodon and somebody was saying like, yeah, I think expert systems. And somebody else said, wow, that's a really good term. I think I'll start using it. And somebody's like, yeah, that's from the 90s. Yeah. You know, it's like, it just all comes around and goes around. So that is encouraging to see not an overload. Okay. So if that's what we didn't see, what did we see a lot of? Like what was hard to sort through? That there was just like, hey, there's a lot of good work in this one area, but we're going to only have to pick one or two talks.
I think hardware track evolves, and this year it was really hard to pick good talks from hardware area. A lot
of more submissions in hardware track than you expected.
Yes, but also hardware evolves in a way that I didn't expect it to happen this way, because I'm a person who's used to doing hardware on a very low level, which means electronics, which is soldering, which is oscilloscopes.
Right, decapping chips and dumping.
Exactly that. Yeah. Not even lower. However, these days we are seeing hardware research, which is basically getting firmware off the device and reverse engineering the firmware, which is basically software reverse engineering. However, it's still treated as hardware research. And I'm seeing this change, we are seeing this change in that we no longer look at the hardware at the lowest level. And I'm not necessarily saying that it's bad, because maybe we don't have to anymore. And seeing all those talks about how to verify, check, or improve hardware security, focusing on the software side, may mean that maybe hardware is already secure. So maybe there is research going on into low hardware level, but maybe nothing is being found. Or the shift in skills is happening because it's much easier to do hardware research when it's software research, right? Because you basically take the software out and do it on your laptop.
And I'm betting a lot of the hardware devices don't have the sophisticated memory protections.
Yeah,
right?
absolutely.
That an OS does, so it's actually easier then to understand what's going on.
Yes. So I don't know if it's a good or bad thing, but definitely there's a shift. I suppose it's a similar shift that we had like when we were younger than we are now. Low-level networking, L1, L2 was a thing. Like we even had to, not had to, but we did know the L1 stuff on the Ethernet, we knew the electrical levels because that was required, right? Now, no one, I wouldn't say no one, but it's not that important to know this because things are happening on higher levels. Maybe it's the same with hardware.
Right. Less people care about transport and they care about
exactly,
apps.
because you buy a box, you buy, I don't know, any kind of development board, and you treat it like a black box that you put software on. You don't actually analyze the black box itself. So maybe that's where we are going. Maybe hardware is secure, or maybe there is not enough research happening. So going back to my point, going through the talks in the hardware track, because I'm on the review board, I'm always saying I miss hardware research, like proper low-level hardware research.
I believe as a community, we absolutely need to understand hardware so we can revolt against our robotic overlords.
Yeah,
AI. Right? I mean, if we don't have a way to defend against the robots, we're doomed.
Yeah.
I'm serious.
Interesting, one area that has become a barren wasteland.
What is?
AppSec.
Oh, AppSec.
If we didn't have James Kettle, we'd be screwed. Like literally, because it's funny, like you just don't see any good application security research coming through these days. It's like we've either solved it, but then again, we look at all the breaches happening against all these commercial applications that it's like SQLi bugs. And you think, nah, come on, there's no another VPN vendors using CGI, they're using a CGI script. But we're not seeing the same in the research. So we either hit the plateau of where we know all the bugs, we know all the bug classes, there's nothing new. Attackers are still owning everything under the sun.
Using the same,
Yeah, so it's a weird position to be in.
Is it one of those things where I'm always curious, if attackers are clever, they'll do the least sophisticated thing necessary to get in. And when you stop them, they'll finally go up the food chain a little bit.
Ransomware crews.
Why
ransomware
ever
crews
improve if you don't have to? So is it that they're still getting in with the easy stuff and the researchers are bored with that, so we're busy thinking about...
I think it's that. I think as an industry, we are awful at detection engineering. You know, just last week, a massive semiconductor was found to be breached, and the attackers were in the network for 2.5 years. And I've not stopped thinking about that. Like, at what point do you become, move from an attacker to a sysadmin? Because if you've got a shell in a box for 2.5 years, you're doing updates yourself.
Yeah, you got to patch it.
You're patching. You're doing system maintenance. You'd like that's a significant shift in from I'm an attacker to I'm a sysadmin. I'm wearing Birkenstocks now. There's
probably things we can learn from them. How do they keep it updated?
No, and the other thing that boggles my mind is like, what has the global political situation been around hardware chip manufacturing, right? Fabrication. Okay, that's what we do. Okay. Should we pay extra attention to our network?
You think so?
No, we're good.
You
right?
think that,
for 2.5 years. Not even just like, let's call in Mandiant for a once-a-year checkup. You know,
I mean, they moved terabytes. How do you not go? Our bandwidth bill is quite high this month.
Yeah. So, Saša, you were saying something, and we kind of...
Well, I think to your point about AppSec, you know, it feels like the conversation is also somewhat shifted towards a broader conversation of software supply chain. Mm-hmm. And it feels like maybe there we're having a bit of a, you know, maybe misguided conversation. We have a lot of conversation or maybe even over-fixation as an industry on open source components, and we should. There's lots of problems in open source components. But if you look at what runs the Global 2500, I mean, I don't know, the lights in here are decent. Let's just show of hands for those who are involved in projects. How many of you picked an open source tool instead of SAP or Salesforce for your ERP? Exactly 0. Okay, how many picked an open source tool for treasury management, order to cash, hire to retire, your UCC solution instead of Zoom or Teams? Point is, large enterprise doesn't run on open source. Those things you buy as commercial packages obviously have open source in it, but you want the company you can hold accountable for support and patching and things like that. So if you look at where the breaches have happened, right? Circle CI, Kaseya, SolarWinds, 3CX, MoveIt, MeDocs, those are all commercial applications. But we're not yet asking of our commercial vendors the same thing we ask of our open source components, or that we should. Does this have malware in it? Hasn't been tampered with? Does it have embedded secrets? Does it have, CISA, KEV, patch mandated vulnerabilities, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera? We should start asking our commercial software publishers or suppliers the exact same things that we ask our open source.
We should be getting tougher. I mean, Ollie touched on his keynote today. I did it on my keynote last year. We need to be a lot harder on vendors. And I think this is where we as a collective community can turn around to these. There are vendors that we all know in this room who time and time again are getting owned, and owned by the lamest script kiddie bugs in the world. Yet they're still being sold. We still have them on our networks. Nobody's gone in the procurement to say, right, hey, let's say a firewall vendor that begins with an F, like, seriously, give us a break. We're not buying your product if you don't fix it within 12 months. Nobody's doing that. So why would they change? What's the incentive?
Well, how many alternatives to SAP do you have?
Not many.
You know what I mean?
Yeah.
There's a little bit of that sort of king of the hill.
Yeah.
So kind of related to what you're talking about, I'm curious, there's a lot of talk about SBOM. Now there's talk about HBOM. Some people say, oh, well, SBOM isn't perfect, therefore we shouldn't do it. And I'm thinking, well, no, it's an iterative process. SBOM can be very coarse, but 2 or 3 years from now, maybe it gets a little bit more granular, maybe it gets a little bit more granular, and then the tools get a little bit better ingesting HBOM or SBOM. And so I kind of feel like the people who are poo-pooing it are being disingenuous because they want perfect instead of not a starting point. Yep. And so I said, okay, that's fine. What's your alternative? And I don't hear an alternative. And so, so that makes me think that we're not having like an honest conversation, right? It's just more like, I don't like this. I don't have an alternative. And then you're like, well, then how do I know what's in my label, what's in my package, my cereal I'm going to eat this morning?
Well, as an industry, we've once again, sounds like, let the perfect be the enemy of the really good, or at least the on the way to really good, or the better, right? Yeah. So if I go to the grocery store and I'm let's pick something, a celiac, I take comfort in being able to take a package off the shelf and say, yep, this has, whatever bits of gluten or whatever is not compatible with my system, or that I know my system won't respond well to. I'm allergic to it. I don't want this. I want the exact same capability for my software. I want to be able to look at this and say, yep, the ingredients in this software are not good for my system. I will have an allergic reaction if there's any, log force Z in this or whatever. I don't want it in my system. I should have that level of transparency.
Right.
I actually wanted to add to basically all of you said, because it's just now I formulated it in my head, because I would add to this SBOM and HBOM also CH-bomb.
C-bomb?
No, SH-bomb, supply chain bomb. Because you see, it's not only software supply chain, but it's in general supply chain. Now when I do audits, it's just like everything is outsourced. This is managed by that company, that's managed by that company runs my hardware, my servers are in there. It's just like every company having 15 contracts. And then when you start talking about the liabilities, and this is going back to perfect, at Black Hat USA, we actually accepted to talk about software liabilities because this is a new thing. Yeah, we still did not got this SBOM right, but we thought at Black Hat that this is important to have this conversation because it's great to have such conversation because in my research, I've been saying it already a long time that at the moment, asset owners basically carries all the liabilities and basically vendor has no liabilities. And that's not right. So, and we saw that okay, this is a topic, it's just starting the discussion. We still don't know how to do that, but we saw that it was important to have at Black Hat. And when I conduct then audits and okay, you have 15 contracts for subcontractors to do different things, who is liable for what? I need to see your contracts and oh, we don't have, it's not defined, how? And the point is that the contract is something what the lawyers has to do, and lawyers are not experienced, and you start interviewing the lawyers, have you ever had any courses in cybersecurity? No, I don't, but I'm very much interested in the topic. I only had GDPR clear because it's been around for 15 years. So I just but then how do you know which security controls you need to implement on your side and what you need to impose on your supply chain providers?
Well, it sounds almost like, remember when Log4j happened, you would talk to people and they said, all I'm doing is answering calls from all my customers asking me if I have Log4j. So it might actually be useful in the cloud provider or supply chain to be able to say, we hit the button, it's available online, your tool, your RSS, whatever, ingester can ingest it and understand our software supply chain bomb, so you don't have to bother us, right? Because it's evident.
Yeah, and in one software that was interesting also, that was large financial software, and I was trying to ask the admin, how do you update it? And he says, it never asked me to update itself. And then we analyze the software. It's actually the update is inbuilt, and it's very untransparent. So basically, every update with anything what comes in it, it's come for free. And it's basically, it's just pushed to you. So there is absolutely no control. So yeah, SBOM is really very important because it gives transparency, but maybe a little bit also more awareness. But overall, yeah, I would say that also from supply chain, we need to understand our supply chain better in general. What constitutes, I mean, it's such an overused word. What is supply chain? What constitutes supply chain? What should we count as a supply chain? Yeah, and then how do we regulate the reliabilities and responsibilities?
And Marina, I think we were also having a conversation that the same thing we ask of software, since our data is with the cloud providers, we should ask them as well, right? Wherever we're hosting our data, they're custodians of our data when we give it to them to hopefully be good custodians. We should know what software is running that as well. So we should get something like a cloud provider, you know, SBOM or whatever that might look like.
And this is what goes back to Meadow. What she says is like, for example, in cyber-physical system security, we used to have like, it's a system, it's maybe some backend which runs nearby, but it was just like, you need to hack a system. Right now, like majority of the cyber-physical research is suddenly, it's cloud research. So basically, the talks in my track, because I lead the cyber-physical systems track, it's now be just like, well, but there is more cloud here than cyber-physical. It gets stolen from me. At Black Hat Europe, we have 2 talks on which involves basically hacking cloud backend, which then has impact in the physical world. And like the organization spent like 20 years trying to segregate this network, building expensive, like cumbersome infrastructures, digital perimeter, and now you literally cannot buy anything which does not run with a backend in the cloud.
Yeah, it sounds almost like when I hear cloud, I hear third party. Right? So it's almost like third-party track, where it's like all the stuff you depend on that is not yours, and it's ever increasing, right? And I think you mentioned a point earlier, it's less transparent. And I think, I'm not sure if Dan, you mentioned, but there's no CVEs necessarily reported. Like some of them don't feel confident, cloud providers don't.
Yeah, it's an ongoing trend where a lot of cloud providers won't issue CVs to researchers who find bugs, which I think is a bit annoying because it means they get to cover up a big chunk of their shared responsibility. It's like cloud providers are perfect when they're not, right? They struggle with software like
an example might be like Outlook, where there's the local version is patched.
Yes.
But you never know, did they patch it in the cloud? Was that a problem in the cloud? Why won't you tell us if it was a problem in the cloud?
Yeah. Well, you need to buy the extra E5 license.
That's an E5 license.
I would like to add something to the last 10 minutes, because the last 10 minutes we've been talking about software security and controls over software. From my perspective, this is not my primary interest. However, I helped run a few conferences apart from Black Hat, and I've noticed that software security is still not a thing with young people. Because, okay, we are also young, but not as young as we used to be, and we are talking about serious stuff. What I'm seeing that when people are starting into information security in general, they still want to hack and do pen test and do red teaming. Those things like actual software security, supply chain security is not a thing. It's not interesting. And I would love to see a change in that, because I would also love to see change in that, because, okay, to some extent, I would sound like you have to grow up to understand this, but in a way, it kind of looks like this, because it's not that fascinating, because...
Is it not because is it because it's getting more difficult? Like if you want to be an exploit writer or understand mitigations around some operating systems, it's really super tough nowadays. And so you don't just jump in and understand how to build a CFI, hack chain.
I think so, yes. Because
so is there sort of a natural progression and there's just less people completing the progression because they get to a certain stage and they're happy?
I think, honestly, gives you doing the things that we're talking about the past 10 minutes, gives you less street cred than doing...
Are you calling us uncool?
Yes, in a way, yes. No, but this is actually what applies to young people. When they want to get into... mentoring a few people trying to get into information security from completely different backgrounds. And they don't see software security, supply chain, all this stuff. They see hacking. They see hacker movies. They see that, and that where the focus lies. And I don't think it should be that, because we have enough pen testers right now. We don't have enough people looking at supply chain security, for example.
I think it's clear that the movie Hackers did a lot of damage to this industry.
No. No, hackers for the win.
No, sneakers all the way.
Sneakers, no, war games.
I'm down with war games.
Okay.
Right, but yeah.
But I wonder if the availability of information is actually what is more like hindering this progress than helping, because in the past, like literally there was no books, there was no YouTube, there was nothing. Like you literally have to teach yourself. Like, and the more you teach yourself, the more you understand and become better, and you're not even afraid of the challenges. Right now, there is trainings for everything, YouTube video, blog post, and it's so easy to get lost, and you kind of think that it is there, and if it's already written, you're not trying it because you've read it, you don't think that you need to try it. I think it's actually, we are, of course, a lot of people asking it, like, how do I become security professional? And the only answer is by doing. It's like literally by doing.
I've got a sort of a follow-up question, and this is when you're reviewing submissions and you're looking at topics, but you're also seeing where the researchers are coming from. I know post-COVID it's harder for Chinese researchers to get out of the country, but have you noticed any trends on maybe where you're seeing more research coming from other regions of the world or certain parts of the world focusing on certain subjects?
Yeah. For a very long time, research was always focused from US and somewhat Europe. We've seen quite a big shift, especially USA and now EU, where we're seeing less research come out of USA. So it's no longer a superpower in my mind. We're seeing pockets come from LATAM, which is really encouraging. And then
any
Eastern
particular
Europe,
countries?
Uruguay, Colombia, Brazil. I mean, Brazilian hackers. Any Brazilian hackers in the room?
Yeah.
You are the best damn hackers in the world. You have such a flamboyant style. And I wish we saw more Brazilian research, because like when it comes to just criminality, Brazilians know how to own stuff. Right? They're just very good at it. So
they've got swagger.
Yeah, it's full on, yeah, carnival. We're starting to see more there. Eastern Europe, which is really interesting. Traditionally, we associate Eastern Europe with crime, right? But we're starting to see really good research, and then Asia as well. So it's good to see that.
Asia, Southeast Asia,
that whole entire region. Yeah. So traditionally, China for me will always be a big superpower when it comes to research. China is interesting. When we saw the blackout, when PLA basically said, right, you're not going to push research out, we saw it on the review board. We also get to see the waves coming out of China, where one year it will be heavy research around mobile and mobile offensive. Now, for me, my question is always, if that's the stuff they're allowed to release, what's not coming out? So interestingly, this year, we're seeing more and more low-level network-style research coming out. So there's definitely trends that happen in certain geographies where they're going, you know what, we're looking at that. The other big thing that I'm loving is we're seeing a whole new generation target old legacy protocols. So this year, we've seen XM, we've seen SSH bugs, we're seeing SMB, all the old stuff that people probably forgot about. This whole new generation.
But it was beaten on for years, but it's now being checked with new tools.
Yeah. Exchange. I mean, look, if you're getting into research, kick Exchange, right? If you want an ugly attack surface that is impossible to secure, like Exchange is ripe for learning. But we're starting to see these bugs come back, and I think that's quite good in a way because it keeps the vendors honest, but also concerning because of what could come.
I was in a panel this morning, or some kind of executive round table or something on, how to optimize kind of your risk reduction in your security program if you were constrained by budget. And it was interesting because, we had lots of ideas being thrown around, but all of which were generally rooted in you first have to invest up front to get some return later, right? Some big ambitious program or whatever. And one of the topics I brought up, which is kind of very apropos to what we're saying here, is like you would be shocked at the risk reduction you can bring in by just focusing on eliminating, LMR, NTLM, WINS, NetBIOS, SMB. You know, go through your environment and eradicate that, and that will generally be kind of free, right? It's not, there's no capital.
And it makes your network monitoring so much cleaner.
Absolutely, you know, or eliminate, you know, get rid of more local admin, like the stuff that is hygiene and really has a huge ROI and risk reduction.
You almost look like you want to say something.
No, I just agree because this is how you get all the passwords and everything. I just, yes. I just finished 2 pen tests and, you know, like you've owned everything, yeah.
Marina, we've gone passwordless. I keep up. We don't do passwords anymore.
Speaking of passwords, it seems like we're moving into more of a passwordless, single sign-on, 2FA, WebAuthn, centralized identity management, blah, 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 blah. But Saša, I think when we were talking backstage, there's a little bit of concern like, hey, that's adding complexity and fragility. And so before we really talk about it, I'm going to do something I've done every year at a Black Hat, I don't know, for the last 5 years. By a show of hands, who in the audience thinks next year things will be more complex or the same or less? So show of hands, who thinks next year more complexity? Who thinks the same complexity? Less complexity? Who thinks in our lifetime things will ever not increase complexity? It's forever increasing complexity from now until forever. And so in that environment, right?
Yeah, I mean, the concern I have, and, you know, let me obviously clear the record first. Everything I'm about to say is not suggesting that not doing, that doing MFA as single sign-on, you know, all of those good practices is not the right idea. Of course it is. Just keep in mind the level of brittleness or fragility that's introducing into your environment. In fact, there's a great book called Anti-Fragile that talks about exactly this kind of stuff. Just, you know, if you instrument an environment in which, you know, boy, we're so secure because our users can only log into, you know, Salesforce with single sign-on, using MFA with devices of a certain posture, when the endpoint agent is in this state and only coming from these IPs that are enforced by the secure web gateway, that's amazing. That's exactly what you should be doing. But if you should lose your company in 4 minutes in a WannaCry or NotPetya-like situation, and now it's time to ensure that you can simply survive the company, you better have a plan to unravel out of that complexity very quickly and, you know, go back to username and password for a few days or weeks or however long it takes to rebuild your environment. Otherwise, you won't have a business. And I think a lot of what we're just not discussing enough, the complexity that we add in brittleness with some of these things.
You need your sort of an emergency plan B. Break the glass.
That's it, right. You just need to have a plan to undo that stuff should an operational or security situation necessitate it.
Yeah, I think in the past when North Korea was attacking Sony, they switched back to their BlackBerries for sort of out-of-band messaging because the whole enterprise had been compromised, right? Yep. You need some plan.
Back in Shamoon, even earlier than that, right, when Saudi Aramco went down, they had to fax. The only thing remaining that they could do with each other was fax because every other part of the environment, in fact, I think they had to take themselves offline for like 7 weeks completely, like domain shut down everything for 7 weeks. That was quite early, right? That was early 2000s, but
right.
Yeah.
And I remember they bought basically every hard drive in the region.
Right,
because
and it still wasn't enough, yeah.
Right, because the lawyers told them, like, you can't re-image the hard drive. You have to keep every hard drive for evidence.
Right.
So they had to pull hard drives out of thousands and thousands of systems.
Well, from a supply chain perspective, that's another thing, right? Should something be, let's say, an industry event, not just targeting you? Like, what makes you think that Dell can give you 137,000 hard drives tomorrow or machines? You know,
right.
Like, you know, those are practical realities. If you have a larger event, like some of these events have been, like
don't a bad BIOS flash and it eats all of your...
Right, yeah. Right. Yeah. Don't assume that, you know, your favorite OEM has a, you know, your special batch of 60,000 of these waiting for you to order them.
Right. That's a joy. Thanks for putting that into my mind there. I was just going to talk about sort of that fragility and that third-party risk that you're accepting. But yeah. Thank you for that. Okay, so let's then spin a little bit further on, then the insider threat angle, right? I remember back when we used to get a lot of talks on insider threat, anomaly detection, you know, post-Snowden, everybody wanted, remember that? Everybody had a solution to tell you how they were going to stop the next Snowden. And I don't know if any of those actually ever played out. I never hear about the success story of the anomaly detection thing detecting the unhappy insider. And I also noticed that nobody can buy an operating system that allows you to split admin between two people, right? So we still have single points of failure with absolute control. And the closest I think we get is cryptographically we'll split a certificate into two and you hold one key and I hold one key. But that's like a workaround to this concept of multiple administrations, multiple, and I'm not sure where we're going to see a lot of movement in that area. Is it going to be in cloud, where cloud can separate different roles easier than maybe at a, but how do we ever get around these sort of single points of failure? I think somebody brought up earlier that if we're moving into a more conflict, if the future has more conflict, and if one of the adversaries can apply a lot of pressure, identify and apply pressure to, say, a lone admin, you want to, the way you normally deal with that is you just spread out the responsibility, make more people.
Then you increase the risk, and then on the behavioral side, but I think one of the biggest failings of the behavioral stuff is that they required an obscene amount of data. So now you're shifting a big chunk of your data into the cloud, into a provider, where they need to do some kind of AI magic on it, and then hopefully determine that Jeff's about to go rogue.
Right.
Right.
Because my eyes are red
Yeah.
from a cold, but no, I'm really crying because I'm going to
you can't
compromise my company, and I feel bad about
and
that.
I think that's where it's science fiction versus reality. It's like, well, okay, I'm going to dump 2 months of employee data, HR starting to get twitchy, right, into a region of the world that might be under attack. Well,
It just seems like this is an area ripe for research and advancement, and we're not seeing it.
please.
Identity management seems to be all like go to Okta. But it doesn't seem
soon,
to,
Jeff.
Too soon. It doesn't seem to be splitting it up or new ways of conceptualizing least privilege or something.
Well, I think there's a maybe really important thread for the folks that are attending this, which is a lot of the stuff that you're describing become the actual critical enablers for either your success or your failure for programs like Zero Trust. Pretty soon people realize that it's not about deploying a bunch of agents.
Yeah.
At some point, you want those agents to take some sort of meaningful action that will reduce risk. But in order to do that, you have to feed it who should have access to what, when and where, under what circumstances, and on what ports and services. Where is that data coming from? I don't know of a single enterprise that has a clean, authoritative source of record for that, or at least not accurate enough for you to take access decisions on.
Yeah. Or even a thing like how many, out of interest, show of hands, how many of you in your enterprise have a list of critical people who could destroy the company within 10 minutes?
Couple, 1, 2, 3,
5.
4, 5, 6, yeah.
Right? So if you're now doing behavioral analytics, well, that becomes really hard. So.
Okay, so this is the portion of the session where I'm going to open it up to the audience. So we have a microphone on each side. If you've got a question you'd like to ask or something you want to hear us talk about, just stand up, identify yourself, and fire away. The guy that has the critical list of...
Yeah,
okay.
This is going to be hard.
So my first question would be like my name is Bartosz Brill from Germany, and we had to talk about the topic before about the SBOM topic. So my question is, since the EU regulation have made the SBOM now mandatory, so actually everybody is capable of like requesting the vendors for giving out the SBOM list, but a lot of those vendors don't even have those lists being created for their products yet. So wouldn't it be like a good idea to actually take them for their word and like request them to make some kind of like database with every product that is actually commercially being sold with the SBOM included, so we can use this for actually seeing and identifying critical problems that are like based on the supply chain directly in there. Like we have the capability of like asking or making them giving us those information. So the only next step that we need to do now is, force it into like a community-based approach for collecting the SBOMs and then monitor it there. Like, where's the
So is that a question?
I've got a crazy theory here. I think the reason why we're not seeing vendors become so forthcoming is they are very shy in the sauna. I think if they start pushing out SBOMs, we get to see how bad the situation is. Right? So that's the first thing. CISA have the known exploitable vulnerability database, KEV, and I love it because it's the wall of shame. It's the modern version of DEF CON's wall of sheep. If you're a vendor, you don't want to be on KEV, right? Maybe we take the idea of generating an SBOM for the product, right? If the vendor's not going to do it, make one for them.
We'll do it for you.
Yeah, and we're going to put it onto the wall of shame type thing. Oh my God, you're running requests from 1997. That's awkward.
Yeah, I think it falls into, I would say, 3 categories that I've observed. It's either, and it's a lot to your point about the sauna, right? It's either, one, they simply cannot generate an SBOM. Like, it's technically infeasible because they have a mix of commercial components, proprietary components, things that most tooling cannot handle. It's too big, it's too complex, and they cannot generate one. That's one bucket of folks. And there are solutions for that, but by and large, the industry, most vendors cannot. Second bucket is they can generate it, but to your point, they look at it and they say, we have a 27-year-old version of this library running? Yes, we do. We have a 14-year-old framework with this many vulnerabilities? Yes. Well, okay, we can't show that. So clean it up first, and then at some point down the road, we're going to show it. Or scenario 3 is they just don't want to show how much of what they're charging you $3, $4, $5 million a year for is really just a bunch of stitched together open source.
It's a Django project that somebody cloned from GitHub. Yeah.
Absolutely. Now,
Master thesis, Studienarbeit.
Yeah, and
together.
So what might happen is you might start seeing depressed like ACV and overall contract sizes as a result of that third scenario, where people start seeing just how much of it is open and say, okay, look, I know you need to make money, but let's be a little bit more realistic here about what this should cost. There's a number of reasons why SBOMs are still a challenge. Yeah.
Okay, let's go over here. This gentleman.
I wanted to push back a little bit on the idea of complexity. In a world where everything is complex, simplicity becomes a feature, and now there's an incentive for companies to provide simpler platforms, simpler solutions, because everybody's so overloaded with the data. So I was just wondering, because we're seeing that move in many different industries. I mean, a lot of businesses, they don't want to deal with endpoints. They want to go straight to cloud. Everything's on Windows is now an Electron app, and people are just using the browser. So do you see the pendulum swing, from your experience? Like, do you see that any time in the foreseeable future, or is the reason you said complexity keeps increasing, you don't see that, or do you have different perspective on that?
I'll just go quickly. In our early days, you could get 4 people in a room and understand how everything worked, right? Now I could get 20 people in a room and not understand the obfuscated JavaScript, right? Or the software-defined network that it's running with the software-defined Wi-Fi, with the software-defined, and yeah, I think it's just complexity, sort of, specialization leads to certain advantages. The market keeps specializing, right? The market doesn't reward generalists.
I think some of it is also the perspective. If it's for the perspective of the user, absolutely things are getting generally simpler. But in order to achieve that, it's because of the complexity in the back end to achieve that, right? So it's a little bit like the Mark Twain, right? I would have written you a short letter, but I didn't have time, so I wrote a long one instead. It's very hard and complex to make an end-user interface and an experience very simple and elegant. So I think we're seeing that. We're seeing a lot more simplicity for the end user for great reasons of UI, UX, and other reasons. But that's because of so much more complexity behind the scenes to achieve that. Okay, we're going to go to our last question.
Hi, I just wanted to hear a bit more about the hardware aspect. And thank you for the interesting discussion. I really I think Meadow Ellis said that there is a shift in the research from hardware to software, and that the foundational hardware, particularly for critical infrastructure, is so important to discuss. I recently read that there is a 50% chance that in the next 50 years that a solar storm, like an electromagnetic pulse, could damage technology and interrupt the continuity of the internet globally. I really wanted to know, with your expert opinion, what do you think are the consequences of our community kind of failing to really address the hardware aspect of cybersecurity enough?
I would say that I think this is what I was trying to say earlier when I was talking about this shift from hardware to hardware software, is that we are risking, and I don't want to sound doom and gloom, but it kind of is, the less focus we put on the actual hardware, when I say actual hardware, low-level hardware, the more chances are that there's a very big vulnerability hidden somewhere. We are just not seeing it. So one of my, I would say, worries about this shift from hardware to software is that it can be either of two. Maybe there actually aren't as many vulnerabilities. Maybe there's nothing serious. Maybe people are actually doing some research into this low-level hardware. The reason why we are not seeing submissions and talks is because there was nothing in there, right? You don't submit a talk and say that, submit a talk and say that we found nothing. So maybe that's one of the reasons why there isn't as many hardware research out there, but maybe there is not enough focus on this. So to answer your question, what are we risking? Or what's the risk? The risk is that there may be a big skeleton hidden in the closet that no one is looking at, and at some point someone is going to find out. So I would say that would be that would be my take on this. That I cannot say, oh, please researchers do some more research on hardware because that's anyone's choice. And I understand that it's more difficult because to do hardware research you need a lab. You cannot do it on a laptop. You need some sort of hardware, some sort of desk place to do it. That's more complex. You have to invest in some tools. However, and that's probably one of the reasons why there's less of this kind of research. However, I would wish that more people will be doing more research into the lower-level hardware just to secure us from this skeleton in the closet that may be hiding somewhere.
I've got one comment on your concern about the solar flare. It's called a Carrington event. And the benefit that we have with a Carrington event, say, versus a nuclear EMP, is that space weather alerting systems will give us about a day to a day and a half notice of a solar flare that would cause a problem. It'll probably hit about a third of the planet, so it doesn't like wipe out the entire planet. And it's fairly easy to defend against, depending. You basically turn the breakers off on your house, right? You unplug your stuff. Because the electrons come, they hit the long lines, the power lines, and it treats all the electrical lines as sort of an antenna. And so you don't want to be hooked up to that antenna when it arrives in the atmosphere. The long-term effects are basically it's going to burn out most all the satellites that are exposed. Like if the satellite has a 10-year lifespan, now it has a 2-year lifespan, or it might not even survive. But it's not the doom and gloom that sometimes we see in movies. And we would have a heads up that it's coming, and a lot of governments spend a lot of time sort of thinking about this. And in the next 50 years, we're all going to be reinventing our electrical power grids to be compatible with renewable energy, electric EVs. And so when you're upgrading your whole nation's power system, it's easier to bolt on some protections that we now understand than when we first built it and didn't understand. So just so you can sleep better at night.
There's one threat, though. There's one threat you haven't mentioned.
What's that?
So if the satellites are going to fall out of the sky, we're going to get hit the head by a Starlink.
By a Starlink.
He's putting so much stuff in the sky.
Yeah.
So, okay.
All right. Well, hey, that's it. I hope you enjoyed it. We always have a great time talking. We'll be around here for a while after the session ends, and if not, we'll see you downstairs. So thank you very much, everyone.
Thank you.